I'm Sam Roberts of the New York Times. Welcome to the New York Times Close Up. The numbers are daunting: a growing population, shrinking revenue from Washington, aging public works. New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer may not have all the answers, but he has some suggestions to address those issues. He joins us in a moment. Then we turn to a new feature in the New York Times, one way past overdue, literally overlooked. It's a new series addressing notable lives lost without an obituary. Amy Padnani, the digital editor of Obituaries, fills us in on the future of our past. My Times colleagues discuss the lead stories of the week on the backstory, and I'll add some final thoughts on Coda. But first, City Comptroller Scott Stringer, welcome and thanks for joining us. You put out a report at the end of the week on homeless kids who are not going to school. Why not?
This audit is, to me, so critical that we really have to now figure out how we're going to protect the 33,000 homeless students, 19,000 of them who are chronically absent from school, and our audit shows that the Department of Education is basically failing to contact parents, contact students, and help them get into their classrooms. This is a crisis of epic proportion because for whatever the challenges homeless students have, the one ticket to a better life is education. And when we're not getting the kids into the classroom, that's an alarm that we need to sound. So this audit speaks to the fact that 75% of the time the DOE does not contact parents, does not contact students. The DOE has 110 family advocates that actually work in the homeless shelters, but there's so few of them that it's one for every 300 students, and they're obviously not doing the job they're supposed to.
At the same time, the mayor says the number of homeless people has sort of stabilized, but you point out, I think in one recent report, that the spending on homelessness has just about doubled in the past couple of years.
Look, the city's response to the homeless crisis is an abysmal failure. Over 60,000 people are in homeless shelters, 33,000 are our children. We spent 4 years ago $1.2 billion to manage the system. We're now spending $2.6 billion. And while I support the mayor putting dollars into the system to do everything he can to solve the crisis, we also have to measure whether this money is moving the needle and reducing homelessness. His proposal to reduce homelessness by 2,500 is not the solution. And I think there has to be more transparency and more standards to measure against whether, in fact, we're winning this battle. My conclusion today, based on this audit relating to kids, is we are failing the most vulnerable children in the city, and the DOE has got to literally reinvent a strategy around making sure that we are helping every single homeless student. I hope the new chancellor will come in and understand that these audits is about accountability. It's about making sure that we actually have strategies that are going to see real results.
Congestion pricing, ping-ponging between City Hall and Albany. Which version of all those out there, or some other version, do you prefer?
Well, I think that you hit the nail on the head. It's ping-ponging, and that's not how we're going to get a congestion pricing plan. That's not how we're going to get us out of the financial crisis facing our subways and bus systems. Sam, you know I've done the audits on the subway system, calling it just an accident that's already happened. We did a survey on buses. We now have the slowest buses in the nation. So we need to have dedicated resources, funding resources, to get us to a place where we go back to having a first-rate transportation system. The congestion pricing will be successful if we do two things. First, the mayor and the governor really have to come together on this issue and work collaboratively on a real plan. And second, as a former Manhattan Borough president, part of the success of buy-in around the city is to go to communities in Queens and Brooklyn, the Bronx and Staten Island, and talk to people about how we can improve the subway and bus service, especially the bus service, so that we can convince people to get out of the cars and take public transportation, so that that is part of the congestion pricing strategy. We want people out of cars, and we want people to come into Midtown and other places to reduce congestion.
Those are some alternatives, but what about eliminating the congestion pricing option for private cars? What about tolling the bridges? What about $50 or some large surcharge for taxis and private liveries? I mean, which of those seem to make sense?
I haven't focused on or thought extensively about how you phase it in, but I like what I'm hearing, which is you go into a phase-in so you create buy-in. Part of the failure of the last congestion pricing plan, it was really Manhattan-centric. We didn't really think about the transportation issues that people in Queens and farther outside the business core. One of the things my bus report showed, that part of the way we structure our bus routes are antiquated. They were constructed, or they were thought of 50, 75 years ago when the whole city lived or worked in Manhattan, and that's not the case right now. The new business hubs are in Queens and in Brooklyn, the Bronx. So we have to take our entire transportation infrastructure, modernize it for the 21st century, but some of the things we have to do don't cost money. We have to just look at where people are living and where the economy is going.
And one of the other things we found, at least according to studies, is that poor people, for the most part, do not drive private cars into Manhattan.
That's right. And by the way, one of the things we showed in our subway and bus reports, people who make $40,000 or less take the bus. People who earn $40,000 or more take the subways. We have to spend more attention looking at the subways, because part of the workforce we see is people who are working off-hour jobs, whether they're janitors, they're in off-peak hours, and the buses aren't running to accommodate that workforce.
Charter revision, a snoozy kind of topic, but potentially important. You're that kind of a guy. Do we need it? Can we make changes without it? And if you were in charge of the world, which changes should we make?
Well, I think it makes sense every couple of years during a mayoral administration to take a look at how our government operates, look at what we're doing well, look at what needs to change. A Charter Revision Commission, however, that's controlled by the mayor with mayoral appointees, or a council that appoints people who are their own folks, tends to create bias in a charter revision process, and then it becomes political. I think we saw that during term limits and the Bloomberg Charter Revision Commissions, which were really not independent from the mayor. So I'm taking a wait-and-see attitude about how we're going to focus on this. A mayoral Charter Revision Commission that narrowly looks at some campaign finance issues that the city council can better adjudicate. I'm not sure that's worth it. A more comprehensive Charter Revision Commission that looks at city government as a whole intrigues me. I'm excited about that, but the process is going to be very important, so we have a truly independent charter revision and a process where the average New Yorker feels a part of it.
We're about 2 weeks from the state budget deadline. How concerned are you about what the state should be giving New York?
Look, I went to Albany with the mayor at the beginning of the budget process. We need to have our fair share of funding. The city economy is slowing. We need to make sure that we can invest in the issues we care about, whether it's the transportation system, education, help with NYCHA, which is now
the Housing Authority.
The Housing Authority. I've done more NYCHA audits as controller in my term than all the controllers combined, and we're seeing the total collapse of this system. So we need help from Albany. We contribute much more money than we get back. New Yorkers always know we're always going to give more than we get back, but we have to get back to meet the needs of our economy in New York. We drive the economy in New York State, and I think legislative leaders in Albany have to understand that what happens in New York plays a critical financial role in the entire state.
I want to ask you about that further, but first, are you prepared at this point to endorse the governor for re-election?
I'm going to make my endorsements during the political calendar. I think he's done a worthy job in a number of issues. Campaigns are about putting your record on the table, and a challenger has to have that give and take. And so I never think that primaries are not a valuable exercise, but I do think the governor has done a very good job in many areas.
So why not endorse him?
Well, we haven't had that moment yet. It's coming. Things are coming, in the natural cycle of politics.
Okay. Scott Stringer, the city controller, thanks for joining us. If you need more information, you can go to the controller's website at Comptroller, that's with a M and a P, .nyc.gov. When we return, Amy Padnani, digital editor of Obituaries at the New York Times, to Lives Well Lived. Welcome back. Joining me now, my Times colleague, Amy Padnani, digital editor of Obituaries for the New York Times. The first overlooked section appeared last week at nytimes.com and in a special section in the newspaper featuring women, but that's just the beginning. So many fascinating people never got the recognition they deserved. How did this project start, Amy?
Well, I joined Obituaries, as you know, a little over a year ago. And at the time, there was this national debate about race that was heating up, and so was the conversation about gender inequality. And we started getting some notes from readers saying, hey, why don't you have more women and people of color in your pages? So it kind of got me thinking. I wondered, as a woman of color and as an editor at the New York Times, what could I do to advance the conversation? There were all these people coming out of the shadows, sharing tales of injustice, and it really resonated with me. So I kind of tucked that away in the corner of my mind. And then one day I was researching an obit for a woman in the tennis world when I came across a website describing a woman named Mary Outerbridge. She was credited with introducing tennis to America in 1874. And I thought that was so fascinating. She introduced tennis on Staten Island, a place I used to live, which is near and dear to my heart. And I thought, this is such a great nugget about Staten Island. I wonder if she got a New York Times obituary. So I checked in our archives, and she hadn't. So I sort of tucked that away in the corner of my mind. And then as I came across more interesting people, I would search our archives, and I grew this list. And one day thought, well, now I have a substantial list of a couple of dozen people who never got an obituary. I wonder what we should do with this. So we decided, let's look back to 1851, when the New York Times began publishing, and tell their stories now. Now's a good time as any.
Were you looking mostly for women, and were you looking mostly for people of color?
I was looking for anybody who came across my interest. Some of them were even white men, just pretty much anybody who was overlooked in history. So the list really runs the gamut. It
is kind of fascinating that some people may not have seemed all that important at the time. Some of the people we just made a bad news judgment on. Was there any sense that some people, either because they were women or because they were black or anything else, were actually discriminated against at the time? Or is that just hard to tell in retrospect?
It's so hard to say. I mean, especially some of these people died over a century ago, and none of us were here then. So really all we can do is speculate. And some of them definitely died in obscurity. There was Nella Larson, the literary star of the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s and 30s. She kind of withdrew from the limelight later in life, and she died alone in her apartment. Her body was found days later. So it's very likely that nobody even heard about her death. With others, it's just confusing. It's confounding, really.
Well, Sylvia Plath, some of the others, it's remarkable that we did do obituaries on them.
Yeah, I wondered, since Sylvia Plath had committed suicide and so had Diane Arbus, I wondered if we had a policy against writing about people who had committed suicide, but that apparently is not the case.
How long will the series go on, and will it expand to include other people too?
So it has no end date. The sky's the limit. There's so many interesting people to write about that it could continue for a very long time. We're adding a new story every week, at least one. And yeah, in April, we're hoping to introduce men as well. So,
are there criteria for including people, or just people who've never gotten their due?
Well, number one, they have to have not gotten a New York Times obituary at all. Sometimes you'll see somebody got a paragraph or two. That's kind of just the way we did obits back in the day. So they have to have not gotten an obit, and we think about it like, if we were to write about them today, if today they were worthy of a New York Times obituary, if they made news in their lifetime and their death is likely news too, then that person would be worthy of including in Overlooked.
And could our readers and viewers submit their own nominations?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a website, nytimes.com/overlooked, and there's a form that readers can fill out to suggest people we should write about.
Great. Well, please do if you want to do that. Thanks to Amy Padnani for joining us. If you have a suggestion, please write to nytimes.com/overlooked. And the backstory is next, and what a week to cover. Welcome back, and where to begin? Start with the firing of Rex Tillerson, the conviction of former Cuomo aide Joseph Percoco, and the non-candidacy, perhaps, of the mayor's wife, Chirlane McCray. And the nation's children literally led the way against bearing arms. Joining me to discuss these stories and more, my Times colleagues, contributing writer Eleanor Randolph and City Hall Bureau reporter William Newman. Willie, you and David Goodman reporting on the mayor and his wife becoming sort of a Bill and Hillary brand. Where does that leave us?
Where does it leave us, or where is it taking us?
Well, okay, either
one of the
one.
things that we discovered, and this is some reporting that David Goodman did, actually, to step back, there's two levels that this is happening on. First, Chirlane has become much more visible and prominent since January when his second term started. She's out there, she's with the mayor at news conferences, she's making statements, she's named in press releases, and she most recently said that she's interested in running for office. At the same time, in a much quieter way, and this is what David discovered, is that over the last 2 years and into this year, she's really stepped up her travel around the country on city business. And so even as her husband has been
official or political business?
Well, maybe mixed. In other words, even as Bill, the mayor, has been out there and being criticized frequently every time he leaves town because he's trying to build his national brand, his wife, Chirlane McCray, has been traveling all over the country to talk at conferences about her mental health initiatives and similar things, promoting the city and the two of them, in other words.
And her policy agenda.
Yeah, exactly. And so together, you put those things together and you see them now building this national brand, which perhaps they would like to think is similar to Barack and Michelle Obama, but is much more like Bill and Hillary Clinton, where the two of them alternated holding elected office while the other still exerted a lot of influence.
So where is this taking us?
Well, Chirlane has said that she is interested in running for office once her husband is finished being mayor. So you could certainly see that brings them to the final year of the mayor's term when any number of things are open. Borough president in Brooklyn, perhaps, or city council, an assembly seat.
Is he interested in not running for office after his term is over?
He keeps saying, when he's asked if he's interested in running for president, that he's focused on what he's doing now. But
how about something short of president? One usually doesn't go from mayor to president. In fact, no one in New York City has.
Yeah.
That's right.
He certainly couldn't be elected governor, so what is there to run for after you've been mayor? I suppose you could run for the Senate, but where is there a Senate seat coming open?
Eleanor, speaking of governor, the conviction of Joseph Percoco, how does that reflect on Governor Cuomo?
Well, you know, it's a big black mark on Cuomo, and one of the things, you know, when he started out, the first thing he promised was that he was going to fix Albany. He was going to deal with the reforms that people had been talking about for decades. You know, so he canceled the Moreland Commission. What happened was that if any reform really came about, crime by crime, because the prosecutors were the ones enforcing the reform in Albany. And so, he canceled the Moreland Commission and he sort of turned the whole thing over to the prosecutors. Now it's going to be really difficult for him to actually come up with reforms because first of all, his real power ends at the end of March, which is the budget.
His real leverage.
Yes, that's right. And the second thing is that the Republicans in the state Senate are not going to want to give him reform, which he really will need when he hits the primary, which is next September 13th.
Let me ask you with some reluctance, politically, does it really matter? Here's a guy who is running for another term. He has $30 million in his campaign war chest. He doesn't have, at this point, a very serious opponent. Does anyone out there really care enough to either vote against him or vote for an opponent?
Just remember his father. Everybody.
Yes. Well, there, though, there were two things at play. One, I think people had enough of Mario Cuomo, and he didn't give them enough of a vision to vote for another term. Well, I mean, there was no sense of why do we want more of him.
Well, that's absolutely right. And we're talking in March, and the primaries in September, and the elections in November. I mean, just remember we thought Hillary was going to win the presidency at this point. So,
did she?
Shock. Anyway, so I mean, it might not matter. I mean, he's moving on, and he's got 17 press releases every day, and he was lying down with the kids in this sort of Diane
the walkout,
Zuccotti Park the other day, and so I mean, he might be able to confuse the issue enough. And reform in Albany, people have been talking about it as long as I can remember, and what Cuomo and some other people have always said privately is that people don't really care about it. They care about their taxes. They care about, whether their kid goes to a really good school. But when you talk about reform in Albany, it's so...
He came in promising to drain the swamp, didn't he?
He was going to drain the swamp.
Yeah.
A lot of swamps. Yeah. Speaking of which, really very quickly, why are we having dueling charter commissions?
Well, we don't yet, but we may. The mayor has said he will appoint a charter commission to propose reforms to the way the city conducts its elections and campaign fundraising, and the city council separately. But he's going to run that and appoint it, and it's going to be his baby. Separately, the city council has said, well, we want a broad look at the entire city charter, similar to what was done in 1989, almost 30 years ago. And so now they're proposing creating a separate charter commission. The mayors would report out this year, and it would go to voters in November. And in theory, if the city council passes its commission proposal, that commission would run longer, report out next year, and would come to voters in November.
Oh, good. So we could have two votes.
Well, unless the mayor, once again, next year does a new charter commission, which could potentially bump the councils off the ballot.
That's something to look forward to. Thanks to Eleanor Randolph, William Newman for joining us, and I'll have some final words on Coda. New Yorkers can now add Joseph Percoco to the rogues gallery of state and local government officials recently convicted of corruption. The scandalous wall of shame already includes the mugshots of public officials named Boylan, Castro, Espada, Gonzalez, Gordon, Hevesy, Huntley, Kruger, Lopez, Montserrat, Norman, Parker, Patterson, Rosa, Sampson, Seminario, Silver, Skello, Smith, Spitzer, and Stevenson. Even if you flesh out the litany with former Assemblyman Brian McLaughlin, do you still notice one giant gap? No other newly installed member of the Hall of Shame is Irish. Their absence doesn't necessarily reflect an ethnic moral singularity, but it does suggest an ongoing political decline, one that has a silver lining. Senator Pat Moynihan dated what he called New York's Irish era to the early 1870s. That's when Charles O'Connor began the prosecution of William Marcy Tweed, the Tammany Hall boss and a Protestant. Tweed's Tammany successors worshiped their own trinity, Irish, Catholic, and Democrat. They saw their opportunities and took them, but they also gave back in the public works that created Greater New York. Thank the Democratic machine for the Brooklyn Bridge and mass transit. Boss Croker got the subway going, Moynihan recalled, as a favor to a friend. By Moynihan's reckoning, the Irish hegemony ended in 1932, when Mayor Jimmy Walker sailed in self-imposed exile for Europe. Irish Americans assimilated and prospered, not always gingerly. Most prize fighters and a good many saloon fighters die in the gutter, but they have moments of glory unknown to accountants, Moynihan wrote. A good deal of color goes out of life as a group begins to rise, he added. A good deal of resentment enters. Maybe that's why so many moved to the suburbs and became Republicans. Politics was no longer the only route to progress. They could become accountants and doctors and lawyers, and they did. Robert F. Wagner was the last New York mayor who was even half Irish. In 1960, the official city directory, which not coincidentally is called the Green Book, listed 53 municipal officials whose names begin with O apostrophe. 50 years later, there are fewer than 20. And even if rank-and-file Democrats want municipal jobs today, there's barely a party machine left to deliver them. Since 1892, the McManus family dynasty ruled as Democratic district leaders in Hell's Kitchen. Last fall, they were unceremoniously deposed by an Irish-American civil rights lawyer. To be Irish, Pat Moynihan once said, is to know that in the end, the world will break your heart. Not on March 17th, though. Not in New York, which is still home to more people of Irish heritage than Dublin. It's a good time to remember that their forebears were scorned, as some immigrants are again today. Heed the uphill history of the Irish. Happy St. Patrick's Day. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Sam Roberts.